All right, so many of you have been asking about this one, so let's just dive right into a topic I know a lot of you are really curious about, men and dating. Specifically, we're unpacking Greg Michaelsen's book, To Date a Man, You Must Understand a Man. I bet you're ready to decode all those crazy mixed signals out there and build stronger connections. And well, that's what we're all here for. This book has been making waves, by the way. It's got a really solid 3.98 rating on Goodreads. And I think for good reason. It gets into like all the nitty gritty of male psychology and how that plays out in relationships. So to help us unpack all these awesome insights, we've got our amazing expert here. They're going to break down all the core ideas and give us those aha moments, the kind that can really transform your dating game for the better.
Well, I think what's really intriguing about this book is that Michaelson, he just starts by tackling some really common myths about men right off the
Yeah.
bat. He actually argues that men, well, they do experience these really deep emotions, but they often express them very differently than women do.
Okay, so we're not talking about emotionally stunted robots here.
No, not at all. Men might show affection through actions rather
Yeah.
than words.
Mm.
Think about like fixing your leaky faucet instead of writing you a poem,
Yeah.
or their need for respect.
Mm.
That might be a lot more pronounced in men,
Yeah.
just tied to all those societal expectations of masculinity.
Interesting. So instead of assuming he's not invested just because he's not gushing,
Hmm?
maybe we should be looking for those actions that actually speak louder than words.
Exactly. And then the book busts another myth, too, the one that men only care about physical attraction.
Yeah.
While likeness will definitely play a role initially, Michael isn't emphasizes that confidence and authenticity are way more important for long-term attraction.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, who wants to be with someone who's constantly putting on an act?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've definitely been drawn to people who are just comfortable being themselves. It's magnetic.
absolutely. And, that confidence that we're talking about often comes from understanding yourself. Michael Swartzen, he really digs into the psychological differences between men and women here. He argues that men tend to be a lot more compartmentalized in their thinking. They tend to focus on one thing at a time, whereas women tend to have more of an interconnected thought process.
So what does this like interconnected thinking actually look like in practice? Could you give us an example?
Sure, yeah. Imagine like a woman is feeling really stressed about work. She might bring that stress into a conversation about weekend plans, connecting those two seemingly separate areas of her life. But a man, on the other hand, he might be fully focused on just planning the weekend and not even realizing that she's bringing in these outside worries.
Oh, wow. I can see how that difference could lead to some major misunderstandings. It's not that he doesn't care. It's just that his brain hasn't like shifted gears yet.
Precisely. And the book actually offers some pretty good strategies for navigating these differences,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to communication.
Communication, the perennial relationship hurdle. I am all ears for some tips here. What does Michelson suggest?
Well, he emphasizes that men often respond better to direct, straightforward communication. So instead of hinting or expecting them to read your mind, just clearly articulate what you need or what you want.
So instead of sighing dramatically when he forgets to take out the trash, I should just say, hey, could you please take out the trash?
Exactly. It sounds simple, but it can really make a world of difference. Men really thrive on clarity. And on the flip side, active listening is equally important. Really, truly hearing him out, not interrupting, and acknowledging his feelings, even if you don't necessarily agree with him. It creates that safe space for really open communication.
That's so important, that feeling heard and validated. I think we all crave that in our relationships. And speaking of craving things, let's get into the juicy stuff, what men find truly attractive beyond the surface level.
Yeah, so Michaelson, he breaks it down into a couple key elements. Confidence, like we mentioned, is huge. Just that sense of knowing your worth and being comfortable in your own skin. It's not about arrogance,
Mhm.
It's more about just owning who you are, flaws and all.
That resonates with me. I've always felt more drawn to people who are authentic, the people who aren't afraid to be themselves, quirks and all.
Absolutely. And that ties into another important quality, emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
Being aware of your own emotions and being empathetic to his, it really creates a much deeper connection.
It's about going beyond just the surface level conversations and really understanding each other on a deeper level.
Precisely. And of course, a sense of humor never hurts. Sharing your passions, having things that light you up, those are all attractive qualities too. They show that you have a life outside of the relationship,
Mm.
which kind of brings us to another key point, independence.
So it's not about becoming completely dependent on a man for our happiness or our sense of self.
Exactly. Michaelson argues that maintaining your own interests and friendships and goals actually makes you more attractive, not less.
I can see that. It's that whole idea of bringing two whole, complete individuals to the table rather than trying to complete each other.
Right. And when we approach dating with that sense of independence and self-awareness, it's just the dynamic. We're not desperately seeking validation. We're showing up as our authentic selves, ready to connect with someone who appreciates us for who we are.
That's empowering. And it leads us perfectly into the next layer of the book, understanding the deeper emotional needs that men often have, even if they don't always express them.
This is where things get really interesting. Are you ready to unpack those needs?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Okay, so we've talked about how men think what attracts them and the importance of, clear communication. But now let's dive into those deeper emotional needs. What's kind of lurking beneath the surface?
Well, one of the most fundamental needs for men is respect, and it often goes unspoken. But Michaelsen really explains that it's deeply tied to their sense of self-worth and to their masculinity.
That makes sense. Society puts a lot of pressure on men to be providers, protectors, and problem solvers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So showing genuine appreciation for his efforts, acknowledging his contributions,
Hmm.
and valuing his opinions even when they differ from yours.
Yeah.
That goes a long way in fulfilling that need for respect.
It's about recognizing him for who he is and what he brings to the table.
Precisely. And alongside respect comes the need for trust. And this isn't just about like fidelity. It's about believing in his capabilities, giving him space to make decisions, and showing confidence in his judgment.
So it's that balance between being supportive and also giving him the freedom to be himself.
Exactly. It's about understanding that he needs to feel capable and competent in his own right. And speaking of feeling good, validation is another crucial emotional need for men.
Yeah, I think validation is something we all crave, regardless of gender. But how does it manifest specifically for men, according to Michaelsen?
Well, for men, validation often comes from achieving goals and overcoming challenges. It's about recognizing and appreciating his efforts, celebrating his successes, and offering encouragement when he faces setbacks.
So it's not just about saying good job for the sake of it, but genuinely acknowledging his hard work and the unique qualities that he brings to the situation.
Yes, and it's about understanding that sometimes actions can speak louder than words. For example, if he's put a lot of effort into planning a date expressing your enjoyment and appreciation throughout the evening, that could be more validating than a simple thank you at the end.
That's a great point. It's those little acts of affirmation that show you're truly paying attention and appreciating him for who he is. But let's be honest, not all relationships are smooth sailing. What does Michaelson say about navigating those inevitable bumps in the road?
Well, he dedicates a significant portion of the book to identifying red flags and deal breakers. It's about recognizing those early warning signs that indicate that maybe the relationship might not be healthy or sustainable in the long run.
So we're talking about those gut feelings that something isn't quite right.
Exactly. Michelson encourages readers to trust their instincts. If you consistently feel anxious, insecure, or disrespected in the relationship, well, those are red flags that shouldn't be ignored.
What are some specific red flags that he highlights?
He mentions controlling behavior, excessive jealousy, disrespect, and a lack of communication. Those are all major warning signs. And it's also about being aware of your own deal breakers, those non-negotiables that you're simply not willing to compromise on.
That's so important. It's about knowing your worth and not settling for a relationship that doesn't align with your values or needs. But what about those relationships that have the potential for something real and lasting? How do we nurture that connection and make it thrive?
Well, Michelson provides a framework for building a healthy long-term relationship, and it's based on mutual respect, trust, and continuous growth.
So it's not just about finding the right person. It's also about putting in the effort to cultivate that connection over time.
Absolutely. He emphasizes the importance of effective communication, viewing disagreements as opportunities for growth rather than threats to the relationship. It's about learning to communicate your needs clearly while also being receptive to his perspective.
That sounds like a tall order. Any practical tips for navigating those tricky conversations?
He suggests regular check-ins, setting aside dedicated time to connect, share feelings, and address any concerns before they kind of fester into bigger problems. It's about proactively nurturing the relationship rather than waiting for things to break down.
That's such a valuable tip. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget to prioritize those deeper conversations. But what about those times when we hit a snag? When a disagreement escalates into a full-blown argument, what's the best approach?
Michelson stresses the importance of approaching conflict with empathy and with a willingness to understand the other person's viewpoint. It's about taking a step back from the immediate emotions and trying to see the situation from his perspective.
That's easier said than done in the heat of the moment. Any strategies for keeping those emotions in check?
Well, he suggests taking a break if things get too heated, giving both of you time to cool down and process your thoughts before resuming the conversation. It's also important to focus on the issue at hand, rather than resorting to personal attacks or bringing up past grievances.
So it's about fighting fair and focusing on finding a resolution that works for both parties. But what about the bigger picture? What does Michaelsen say about ensuring that the relationship continues to grow and evolve over time?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of supporting each other's personal and professional goals, celebrating each other's successes, and offering encouragement during challenging times. It's about viewing the relationship as a partnership where both individuals are committed to growth and evolution.
Wow, we've really unpacked a lot today about men and relationships. I feel like I'm starting to see things from a whole new perspective.
Yeah, it's really amazing how a little shift in understanding can make such a big difference.
Totally. It's like having all these aha moments and suddenly everything clicks into place. So as we wrap up our deep dive into to date a man, you must understand a man, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should walk away with?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to remember that men and women often approach the world differently, especially when it comes to emotions and communication.
That whole compartmentalized thinking versus interconnected thinking thing, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
So instead of getting frustrated, when he doesn't seem to be on the same wavelength emotionally, try to understand where he's coming from and maybe adjust your communication style accordingly.
So more directness, less hinting around.
Precisely. And on the flip side, active listening goes a long way. When he feels heard and respected, he's more likely to open up and share his feelings.
It's about creating that safe space for genuine connection. And speaking of connection, let's not forget those deeper emotional needs that men often have, even if they don't always express them.
Yeah, respect, trust, validation. Those are all crucial for his emotional well-being and for the health of the relationship.
And it's not just about grand gestures, it's those little acts of affirmation that show you truly see him and appreciate him for who he is.
Exactly. And remember, understanding yourself and your own needs is equally important.
That whole idea of empowerment that we talked about earlier, it's about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and not settling for anything less than you deserve.
Because when you approach dating from a place of self-love and confidence, you attract the right kind of partners, the ones who respect you, value you, and support your growth.
And speaking of growth, one of the things that really resonated with me from the book is the importance of continuous evolution, both individually and as a couple.
It's about embracing change, supporting each other's dreams, and viewing challenges as opportunities for learning and growth.
That's so true. It's not about finding someone who completes you, but someone who complements you and walks beside you on this crazy journey called life.
Beautifully said. And remember, even in the most compatible relationships, there will be bumps along the road.
Those inevitable disagreements and conflicts.
Exactly. But it's how you handle those conflicts that determine the long-term success of the relationship.
So communication is key.
Absolutely. Michaelsen emphasizes the importance of clear, honest communication, approaching disagreements with empathy, and viewing them as opportunities for growth rather than threats to the relationship.
It's about fighting fair and focusing on finding solutions that work for both parties.
Precisely. And those regular check-ins, those dedicated times to connect and share feelings can prevent small issues from snowballing into major problems.
It's like preventative maintenance for the relationship.
Exactly. And finally, remember that red flags are there for a reason.
Those gut feelings that something isn't right.
Trust your instincts. If you consistently feel anxious, insecure, or disrespected in the relationship, those are warning signs that shouldn't be ignored.
It's about knowing your deal breakers and being willing to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your values or your vision for a healthy, fulfilling relationship.
Because you deserve to be with someone who treats you with respect, who makes you feel safe and loved, and who brings out the best in you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I feel like we've covered so much ground today, but it all boils down to this. Successful relationships are built on a foundation of understanding.
Understanding of the differences between men and women, understanding of our own needs and desires, and understanding that relationships require effort, communication, and a willingness to grow.
And sometimes that growth involves letting go of relationships that no longer serve us so we can create space for something even better.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, approach dating with an open heart, a curious mind, and a commitment to understanding yourself and your potential partners.
Because with the right mindset and a little bit of effort, you can create the kind of loving, fulfilling relationships you deserve.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up our deep dive into To Date a Man, You Must Understand a Man. A huge thank you to our incredible expert for sharing their insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Remember, the best relationships are those that inspire us to grow, learn, and become the best versions of ourselves. Until next time, happy dating!